Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the State of the Market webinar. My name is Ben Zong and I'm the Online Communications Manager for the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. Today we're going to go over the Hydrogen Refueling Station Network and then also share with you our newly published Hydrogen Powered Truck ebook. This is going to be a general overview, so if you have any technical questions or if you're with the media or if you have questions outside those two topics, please do email us on the side and we'll cover those items again via email. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is going to be from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. with a Q&A session at 10:45 a.m. Typically, we're not able to answer all of your questions, and so we will respond to those questions later on, and we'll post both the Q&A as well as this presentation. And then this webinar is going to be recorded as well, and so we will post that recording onto our website later next week. When those documents are available, we will shoot an email to all of the registrants with a link to where that's located. To ask questions, please use the GoToWebinar questions feature that you see here on the screen. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer Hamilton, the Operations and Technical Director here for the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership. Jennifer.
Great, thank you, Ben. And hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar and happy Hydrogen Week. I would like to take a few moments to tell you about our presenters and a little bit about the agenda today before we dive in. So your moderator today is Mr. Ben Xiong. You may know him from the previous webinars we've hosted. He's been with the partnership for 16 years and has managed our online resources such as our website, social media, and the station operational status system, of which you'll hear about in a few moments. He also leads our station developer and operator working group. Also with us today is Mr. Dave Park, who's been with the partnership since 2018, managing industry affairs. He works to align the interests of the manufacturers of the vehicles, light duty and medium and heavy duty truck manufacturers. And I have been working in codes and standards. Some of you might remember me, and also in our operations, but also I am leading our government group, which includes federal, state, and local agencies. So you can imagine there's a lot of collaboration among us as staff of the partnership, as well as you'll hear in a moment with our members. Today's agenda is got a couple of different aspects to it. First, you'll hear about the status of the consumer hydrogen and fuel cell electric vehicle market, where you'll hear about the state of the hydrogen fueling network and the automotive market and the complex dynamics that drive that consumer market. And then we'll continue with the consumer market discussion and a bit of a dive into the outlook for the broader industry, which includes some recent work the partnership's done on vision and roadmap and the commercial truck market. Next slide, please. So what you're going to hear about today all falls within our strategic priorities, where we work within these various aspects of the hydrogen and fuel cell market. Our members don't just talk about supporting the broader hydrogen mobility ecosystem. We build it together through joint projects, strategic planning, stakeholder education, and coordinated action that creates solutions for reaching a mature market. Next slide, please. Our diverse membership, which includes hydrogen producers and suppliers, infrastructure developers, of course, vehicle manufacturers, local and national government, and NGOs, all collaborate to create industry consensus on market-critical activities that advance fuel cell and hydrogen deployment. So with that, I'd now like to turn it back over to Ben and Dave. Then we'll discuss the state of the retail hydrogen fueling network. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the partnership's main goal has always been to provide education around hydrogen and fuel cell technology for the general public and for vehicle drivers. However, we have revamped our website to educate decision makers in California and in other regions who can learn from California's experiences. Also, we're improving our resource center to add filters and keywords to allow you and your organization to quickly find the resources that are most pertinent to you. And then for drivers, we're continuing to improve our station operational status system to add additional features that will help you to find the stations that you're looking for. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit here. And then for our members, we're adding an improved member portal so you can see in real-time information that's most pertinent to your organization, such as real-time SaaS data analytics. So I want to walk through a few resources that I think this audience will be most important for this particular audience, and that's starting with our station map. And apologies for the camera here as I move to the other screen. So starting with our station map on the new website here, you're going to find our station map under data and maps here, under station map. And when you come onto this site here, into this map, you're going to see stations that are open and available for customers in the light duty market. We also track stations that are currently in development in their various stages of development. So if you click on any of the filters here, you'll see stations that are in construction, permitting, and those are proposed as well. And then we also track heavy duty stations as well. So those are our bus and our truck stations. And all of these are stations that are within California. We are also going to be adding stations outside of California, such as the Washington station that is operated by the Douglas County PUD, as well as the stations up north in Canada. And so those will be added later this year. The next resource I want to share with you is our resource center. So if you click on resources here, it will take you to our resource center where you can quickly access our blogs, news, events, and our resources. And so for our events, these are events that the Fiscal Partnership participates in, and also are events that are pertinent to the industry. If there's any events here that you feel was missing, please do contact us, and we'll make sure to add that onto this list. And then the last tool I want to share with the group is, again, the Station Operational Status System, or what we call SOS. This is a tool for customers to see in real time what the status is at a station. If you see a green circle, that means that station is currently online and can get you a full fill. A yellow triangle here means that the station is operational, but you're not going to get a full fill. A red square there means that the station is currently offline and there's a couple of different reasons that takes stations offline: mechanical issues, if it's run out of hydrogen, sometimes there's construction at the site. And so if there's any information, usually the station operators will put a note onto their station here, and you'll see this information icon that will alert you to that. If you see this refresh, that means that the station is currently rebuffering the high buffer storage. And so usually it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for the station to rebuffer, and then you can get hydrogen again. And then if you see a question mark, that means that the station has lost data connectivity. And so what you'll want to do is you'll want to click onto the station here if you see a question mark. And there is a customer service line here where you can contact the station operator directly, and one of the representatives will let you know what the status is at that station. Again, this is the note that the station operators typically put onto their station. Usually there's a timestamp of when that note was last updated. If there's a conflict between the note and the status, always go with the status, as that's real time. And sometimes there is a delay in the station operators coming in to update their note. As a driver, you can also create an account with SOS, and then from here you can report whether there's or how many dispensers are operational, as well as how many vehicles are in queue at that site. This site is built to be mobile friendly, and so if you're viewing this on a mobile phone, you can click on Get Directions, and it will open your mobile app or your mapping app to allow you to get directions to that station. Now, this system is also transmitting data to all of the automakers. So Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, all their dashboards uses the same exact data, as well as Hygo and True Zero. Their apps are also using the same data as well. We will be developing our own app that's going to be launched next year, thanks to the CC as well as Iwatani. And so please do be on the lookout for that as well. An update on the California Retail Hydrogen Station Network, as well as the network health. So we did have 2 stations that opened this year. We had the Chevron station that opened in Southern California in Moreno Valley that opened in April. And then we had the Vacville station that opened here in Northern California in June. We're expecting to see 3 more stations open this year, with Chevron's Carson station. Iwatani has the La Mirada station, and then Sunline's Thousand Palm station is going to open as well. Sunline does have a heavy-duty dispenser that was open earlier this year. However, again, that's for heavy duty vehicles. So if you have a Mirai, for example, please wait until the light duty side is open. And again, we're expecting that later this year. There are 7 stations that are currently unavailable, listed here. We know the Hawaiian Garden station is expected to open this quarter. Unfortunately, the other 6 stations, we don't have a timeline for those stations yet. Looking at the network health, so the graph that you see here, this is showing that the availability of hydrogen stations from 2021 until 2025 here. And so we have seen the availability of hydrogen stations dip quite dramatically in the years past from mechanical issues. We also had a supply disruption that occurred in 2023 through 2024. However, we have seen a ton of improvements to the equipment thanks to the CC Improve grant, as well as Iwatani and True Zero have made a ton of their own investments into improving their equipment. And so the reliability of the stations are much better. And then also, we just have, with the supply disruption resolved, we've again seen our availability upwards in the 80% range. And now I'm going to hand off to David Park to continue. David.
Great, thank you, Ben. And so jumping off of that discussion on the state of the hydrogen fueling network, what I will be going into are the overarching factors causing today's current market conditions, noting that there are very complex dynamics at play. And so with that, before diving into the headwinds, it's worth remembering how far we've come. California is a global leader in the early hydrogen market and deployment of fuel cell electric vehicles. Our market now spans 51 retail stations. We did hit a peak of 60 stations back in around 2023. And then we've seen some real peaks and valleys in the availability of stations. As you can see in the chart, there was a major dip right in the in the middle of 2024. And that was the disruption in the gaseous supply chain that Ben just mentioned. However, the vehicles themselves are exceptional. They provide long range and fast refueling with no pollution. And they prove that the technology works in daily use, and our vehicle sales have exceeded 18,000. But the reality is that California's hydrogen fueling stations are some of the first in the world, and the fueling network has survived significant growing pains. What we're seeing now is that older stations are reaching their end of life, and therefore the network has been contracting. What we have is our pipeline of stations has been slower in deploying. What you see is behind the 51 stations that are currently available are 30 stations in development. And the reason behind that slowdown in new station development is related to the market forces that I will be covering in the next few slides. What we're experiencing today is not a failure of fuel cells, but it is the result of natural growing pains of scaling our completely new hydrogen fueling supply chain, and noting that that supply chain is competing against incumbent fuels like gasoline and diesel. And those fuels have been around for more than a century, and they've worked out all of the costs out of their systems. And so their margins are very thin, and there is much redundancy in those supply chains. Hydrogen, being a new technology, has to compete at that scale, and it is a very challenging proposition. But if we didn't do this work, then there would not be change. What we have is California's leadership through the Air Resources Board and the Energy Commission and the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOBIZ, and our industry partners who have all been critical in laying the foundation. The partnership remains strong and is evolving as the market matures. Next slide, please. So getting into the current conditions, over the past 3 years, the drivers of fuel cell electric vehicles have faced an undeniably tough market. Retail hydrogen prices rose sharply starting in 2022, not because hydrogen became more expensive to make, but because of a convergence of market stresses. The lower carbon fuel standard credit, which underpins all renewable fuels, lost two-thirds of its value, undercutting the financial stability of suppliers. And you can see that dip happening right in the 2022 timeframe. And you can see also the resulting increase in the pump price of hydrogen as that LCFS credit really cratered for the most part. So simultaneously, there was a rapid growth in fuel cell electric vehicle sales, outpacing station development. That caused overdemand at existing stations, and then that was also compounded by hydrogen shortages due to supply chain disruptions. These were all very early market challenges, and we had many fewer suppliers of hydrogen in the early market. As a result, the stations experienced high operating costs, and these were exacerbated by fragile equipment supply chains that also extended the duration of outages. The good news is that the market is stabilizing. CEC's improved grant enabled station developers to incorporate hardware and software improvements, significantly improving station reliability. In addition, we have operational lessons that have been absorbed to the benefit of the hydrogen fueling station network. And then last but not least, the Air Resources Board did adopt and implement revisions to the low carbon fuel standard program. These revisions are designed to create a rebound in credit values and over time translate to lower retail hydrogen prices. We are reliant on market mechanisms, and so no one can predict how long and to what extent the low carbon fuel standard program credit will rebound, but it is our work to also identify other mechanisms that we might help the market with during that interim period. But now that the market is reorganizing and more resilient structures are being put into place, we're seeing new production capacity and more delivery, supply chain, and stronger coordination within and between states and industry. All these are foundational for sustainable growth. Next slide, please. So what does the future bring? It's important to remember that the light-duty consumer market was never the end state. It is a proving ground. Those early stations, all of the early adopters, and all those early learnings are exactly what enable the industry to do now and to move into hydrogen's next phase, which is centered around commercial trucking. The lessons learned from the fuel supply chain, station reliability, and cost structures directly inform the infrastructure needed for medium and heavy duty fuel cell electric truck fleets. These new use cases bring steady, predictable fuel demand that can strengthen the entire hydrogen supply chain, which will benefit all drivers. At California's request, the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership has developed our new hydrogen mobility vision and roadmap. This roadmap takes us from where we are today, a limited number of fuel cell electric automobiles and stations, towards a 100% zero emission vehicle transition. What's groundbreaking about this vision and strategy is it's designed to include a fuel cell electric vehicle component within the larger ZEV ecosystem, which has never been defined before. What we've laid out are 3 distinct phases: demonstrations, pre-commercial launch, and commercial scaling. We have clear milestones and targets that align policy, infrastructure, and market development. You might note that we don't have any years associated with each of these phases of market development. And that is where we hand it off to the policymakers to determine what kind of glide path fuel cell electric vehicles and the ZEV market can take. So yes, we've been through a rough patch, but we're also recalibrating. What's emerging now is a more resilient, better understood, and more strategically aligned market that's ready for the next phase of growth. And to you, the drivers who've stayed with us through the tough years, your experience and persistence matter. The network you helped build is what's making it possible to serve the next generation of hydrogen vehicles, trucks, buses, and eventually back again into more affordable and reliable light-duty fuel cell electric automobiles. Next slide, please. So now that we've covered where the market has been, we are going to go into where the market is headed. Let's shift gears and talk about how fleets fit into this roadmap. The next major wave of hydrogen mobility will be driven not by consumers, but by commercial operators. Companies moving goods, not people. In California, we have 4 truck stations available and another 17 in the developmental pipeline. We're in that, between that crawl and walk phase on the developmental timeline that was in the previous slide. But even with these emerging resources, we recognize that to the commercial sector, hydrogen-powered truck adoption is a very calculated proposition. They really focus on the bottom line. So, next slide, please. What we've developed is a new ebook to help fleets navigate this transition. We worked with a core group of authors and industry partners to develop a practical, plain language resource, Hydrogen-Powered Trucks, a complete fleet guide. This book is designed to answer the questions that fleet managers will ask and have been asking, from cost and fueling logistics to vehicle performance, infrastructure readiness, and incentives. This covers the spectrum of everything that we've discussed regarding the light duty sector, and now we're translating to the commercial truck sector. Everything we've discussed, from hydrogen costs to California's roadmap, lead here. The next chapter of hydrogen mobility is about fleets, vehicles that move goods and not people. Next slide, please. So when we talk with fleet managers, the questions that we receive are incredibly consistent. They're not abstract about policy or long-term vision, they're practical ones about how these trucks will operate within the fleet environment, the commercial environment, and at the bottom line is how these vehicles will make the fleet money. So questions are like, what is hydrogen? Is it a liquid? Is it a gas? How do I get that fuel into my vehicle? What's a fuel cell? How is it different from a battery? How is it different from a diesel engine? How much does it cost to buy and operate this truck? What does it actually take to fuel a truck? Where can I get fuel? How much does that fuel cost? These are the right questions. They are the same ones that came up during the early years of passenger vehicle electrification, and also we've seen the same questions come up on the natural gas side as well. But the answers to the questions regarding hydrogen have been scattered and technical and sometimes inconsistent. And so what we have done is we have worked to compile all of these questions into this ebook. Hydrogen-Powered Trucks is designed to be a trusted, plain language starting point for fleets, policymakers, and vehicle manufacturers to build a common understanding of the technology, the economics, and the infrastructure behind the economy. I do want to thank the co-authors on this resource because it was a several-year process, and it did take their guidance to really get to the crux of what people would find practical. Next slide, please. So to navigate the book, go to our homepage, h2fcp.org, and then slide over to the menu item, Priorities, and then in the drawdown menu, select Heavy Duty Transportation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a walk through some of those critical questions that we've been hearing from fleets, and you can see where they are in the menu. I encourage you all to follow along in real time. So if you'd like, go ahead and jump into our web page and go into Priorities, click on Heavy Duty Transportation, and then we will go to the next slide. From there, it puts you in the executive summary. Along the right-hand side of the screen, you will see the menu bar pop up. That's our table of contents. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see the menu item Science of Hydrogen. If you click on that menu item, then that will take you to the Science of Hydrogen page. And next slide. And that takes you through some fundamental understanding regarding the chemical and physical properties of hydrogen. Feel free to peruse that page and scroll down. But then also the other questions, and so what this page does is it goes over the challenges of hydrogen being a gaseous fuel at ambient temperature and pressure, how it's used as a liquid fuel, and for instance, the liquefaction temperature for hydrogen gas, and some of the basic properties around the handling of hydrogen as a cryogenic fluid or as a ambient temperature gas. And then one of the other major questions that we receive is, what is a fuel cell? In fact, many people don't have an understanding in the lay world of what fuel cells are. So if you click on the menu item under hydrogen fuel cell trucks and then click on how fuel cells work, you'll get to this discussion about what a fuel cell is and how it works. Again, this is meant to be a guide for the layperson to understand better how the technology works. And then, of course, a major question comes up regarding the cost of the project. And so we are, as I mentioned, in that in between crawl to walk phase. Demonstration projects are happening in real time. So if you click on the demonstration project element of the table of contents, and then you'll see sample budget, that takes you to a sample budget where we've compiled information regarding some of the past demonstration projects that have happened, as you can see, at the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Oakland. Those are both grant-funded projects. So what we've done is we've gone through the public information on those projects, and we have developed this sample budget. Please understand that these projects are already in the past. They're projects that are actively on the ground and operating. And so some of those budgetary numbers have likely changed. What I'd like to point out is that this is a very generic budget, but then that speaks to this web page. The web page is designed as a evergreen web page that we will consistently update as we receive better information. So this is not a static number. As the technologies mature, we will go in, we may completely revise this table, or we may revise some of the individual cost values that are associated with the technologies. And we will be using the most up-to-date public information. So then finally, and perhaps one of the most practical things that we have is on the handling of hydrogen itself. So if you go to the menu and go down to about the bottom quarter of the menu, you'll see the selection for hydrogen fueling infrastructure. And then if you click on gaseous dispensing, it will take you, next slide please, to our discussion of how hydrogen fueling stations work. What we show here is on the screen is how a gas to gas station works. So what is shown on this chart is we have hydrogen being supplied in its gaseous form, either by pipeline or by a delivery truck, delivering gas to the station, and then through each of the stages of compression, refrigeration, and then dispensing to the vehicle. You'll notice that there are two paths for gaseous dispensing. And on the black path, the black truck on the right, that is a 70 MPa truck. So that would be fuel, hydrogen fuel that's delivered at 70 megapascals or 700 bar. The gray truck on the bottom is a truck that fuels at 35 MPa or 350 bar. And so these are some of the common terminology that you see in the industry. One of the questions that we get frequently is, what does the 70 MPa and the 35 MPa mean at the fueling station? And many times customers interpret those as different grades of hydrogen when in actuality they're different pressures that are that the hydrogen is being delivered at. And so this is a guide to help the practical end users of hydrogen understand the technology. If they would like to understand the pressure, the reason behind the pressure and the science behind the pressure of hydrogen, they can click on the Science of Hydrogen link and dig in where they need to. What we're not showing in this slide deck is whether then the other fueling stations that we show is the liquid delivery station. So a station that takes liquid hydrogen in and stores liquid hydrogen at the station and then dispenses that as a gaseous fuel. We go into liquid to liquid fuel transfers, and then we talk about a trend that has been happening, and that is the development of a network of prefabricated fueling stations. So these are stations that are, I wouldn't call them mobile fueling stations because they are stations that are dropped on site and are placed in a semi-permanent state to provide fuel to the truck fleets that are adopting these trucks in smaller demonstration project size deployments. So with that, what I would like to say is that we really do encourage you to browse this ebook. And then there is a button on the lower right of the screen that lets you create a printable PDF version of the ebook so that you don't have to be bound to our website. You can download this to your computer and then read through it at your leisure. So with that, I'll just point out that this is a living document. So if you do download it, understand that it will be updated regularly. So some of the information will change over time. With that, I'll conclude the formal portion of the webinar and then turn it back to Ben to lead our Q&A.
Thanks, David. So a couple questions that have come in regarding the book itself. First off is, we have a question around, if folks are, and I'm kind of summarizing some of these questions, if they're in other industries outside of being a fleet operator or being a fleet owner, how can they utilize this truck ebook? So for instance, folks, I think some folks mentioned their maintenance folks, procurement people, how can they take advantage of your truck ebook here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is meant to be a very practical guide. So I think that for people that are unfamiliar with hydrogen and fuel cell technologies, it is designed to be a one-stop shop where if they have a question regarding, for instance, how a station operates, just like I went through, they can find the answers. If they have questions regarding, in fact, we do actually go into internal combustion engines and the use of hydrogen in internal combustion engines. So if they have questions regarding how hydrogen is projected to enter the combustion space, we go into that as well. On the maintenance side, I think that the maintenance people will be very interested in the physical and chemical properties of hydrogen. We try to make it very accessible in terms of understanding the chemistry of hydrogen so that their technicians can read through that and really get a good sense for what this fuel is that they will need to handle in the future.
Thanks, David. And again, let's just step back and mention that everyone is muted during the webinar. We are using the GoToWebinar's questions feature. So if you have any questions, please do add it to the questions text box there, and we'll respond to that. The other question is around geography. So looking at the navigation here, we have California and Texas, and the question is, is it specific to those two areas, or can you talk a little bit more about that?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. So I'm going to, a little background on the ebook is this document was actually developed with a team out of Texas. What we saw was Texas being an oil and gas state, there is a significant amount of hydrogen in Texas and the Gulf Coast in general. We get into this in the ebook, but there's over 1,200 miles of dedicated hydrogen pipeline in the Gulf Coast that supports the oil and gas industry. The most common use of hydrogen is in the production of fuels and then also fertilizer. So specific to the Gulf Coast, they use hydrogen, for instance, in the crude oil reforming process where they crack crude oil and then they refine it to lighter components that go into gasoline, diesel, aviation fuel, other lighter fuels. And so with that pipeline network in the Gulf Coast, there's an opportunity to introduce hydrogen into a retail consumer market, or a not just retail consumer, but also the commercial truck market at prices that California probably cannot compete with in the early market. So there is a great deal of interest in hydrogen as a trucking fuel in Texas. So we did focus on the Texas market, and that was in large part because of our team members. California is a pretty obvious choice because that's where the hydrogen market really globally initiated. And so we dig into the implications for hydrogen in the California market, but then our intention is to add other regions. Like I said, this is not a static document, it's an evergreen document. And so if I can predict what regions we will add next, it will be the Pacific Northwest. We'll go into Canada, where there's a significant amount of infrastructure development going on in British Columbia and then Ontario. In the light duty market, they already have light duty fueling stations in those regions. So Pacific Northwest, Canada, California, that creates one corridor. And then if we're talking about trucking corridors, then it would be to extend the California corridor from California through Arizona and New Mexico into Texas, and then all the way out to the East Coast on a southern route. So I didn't mention the hydrogen hubs, but there's been quite a bit of chatter about the funding of hydrogen hubs, and whether those will move forward, and I'm not going to get into that topic today, but certainly the hub states are probably really good candidates for where we will expand our content.
Dave, there's a question about these truck stations possibly serving light duty vehicles as well. Can you talk a little bit more about multi-modal stations, and is that covered in the book, and just in general about stations that cover both heavy duty and light duty?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for whoever asked that question. And that indeed is the market strategy. The idea or concept of a multimodal station is very much an active discussion within the partnership. And the best example that we have is the Oakland station that was opened by First Element Fuel to support the NorCal Zero project. And if you go into the demonstration projects on the menu bar and then click on the Port of Oakland, you'll see a little write-up of that station location. So what that station, as an example, has two fueling islands. There is a light-duty automobile fueling island, and then a completely separate heavy-duty truck fueling island that segregates the station so that the vehicles have a less of a chance of coming into conflict with each other. We see that design moving forward as really critical for the market. It does several things. It enables the heavy-duty truck market, but then what we're told by the station developers is it's not a significant additional cost, so it's a low bar to also build a light-duty fueling island in parallel with each truck fueling implementation that they build. What we really haven't got into is the medium-duty utility truck space. What we're thinking is that medium-duty truck space really does fit with the light-duty retail fueling model. And that is because what happens is you get two benefits. You open up a medium-duty fuel market, but then in addition, by providing the technology to support medium-duty trucks, which hold somewhere on the order of 10 to 30 kilograms of hydrogen, whereas a light-duty vehicle holds up to 7 kilograms of hydrogen on board. If you provide the fueling for medium-duty vehicles at a light-duty station, that just really benefits that light-duty market. The stations become much more reliable, and then the station economics also help the developers because they will be dispensing larger volumes of fuel, and therefore they will be able to lower their price on a more accelerated scale.
Thanks, David. And so there was a question about printing of the ebook. So we did publish the site yesterday, and of course with technology and with the way it is, the print button's going to exist here essentially. So it didn't get published when we launched the site yesterday, but we'll have that working by this afternoon. And so again, there'll be a print button here that allows you to print it as a PDF, and you can save it. We'll also print that book and have it in our resource center. So if you go into our resources, in there you'll also have direct access if you are not able to print it yourself. There was a question around, so this is primarily around light duty. Where are the stations? Are there stations coming near me? And again, so point us back to the station map here. This is going to be your best resource for looking for stations that, again, are in development or in the pipeline. Again, these stations here are the stations that are currently open. So I'm just going to disable these really quickly. If you click on Retail Open, those are the stations that are currently available to you today. And then if you're looking for stations that are coming in next, those are these stations that are in construction. And then the other stations that are in permitting and proposed, if you click on those checkboxes, that'll let you know what stations are coming next. Also,
So
in our...
yeah, Go ahead, finish your comment. I have a comment to add to that.
And then also in our resource database, there's an H2 stations list that lists all of the stations if you want to see in this view as well. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'm going to be very honest about the timing, and there's been a delay in the construction of new hydrogen fueling stations that support the light duty retail market. And the reality is that the depression of the low carbon fuel standard credit has really delayed the development of all renewable fuels projects, not just hydrogen, but across the board, all the renewable fuels projects. And that is because when station developers receive these grant funds, they still need cash to build the stations. The market was working very well when the low carbon fuel standard credit was trading at $200 per ton. But when the market crashed, and that was in mid 2022, you saw that chart that I showed earlier. But when the market crashed, that was collateral. The station developers had built their business models around a low carbon fuel standard credit valued at $200 a ton. No one anticipated this crash in the market. So that when that value depressed down below $100, the banks, it really flipped those business models upside down, and the banks were very, very reluctant to lend money to developers to build those resources. Hydrogen, renewable diesel, ethanol, all the markets crashed at the same time. And so what the state of California very much understands the economics behind this, which is why they did revise the low carbon fuel standard program, and those revisions were adopted just this past July. So that was only a few months ago. It's going to take some time for that market to rebound. What we're working within the partnership, what we're working on is what are some other mechanisms to backstop the developers so that they can actually obtain the finances to continue to build stations. There are a couple of stations, a handful of stations in the pipeline, but not nearly to the degree that we had in the past. Before this crash, we were trending, we had a trend that was increasing over time. We had in 2021, we had 10 new stations entering the market. We projected that at least 10 additional stations would enter the market in 2022, and then that didn't happen.
Thanks, Dave. I've got a couple of questions specifically around SaaS, so I'm just going to address those really quickly. One is on the futures of SaaS, and one of the questions is around price of hydrogen. Where can I find price of hydrogen? So we do enable the operators to be able to come in and add the price of hydrogen to their specific stations. This is optional, of course, and so if they are posting the price of hydrogen, it will be listed on the page. We are developing that mobile app that we'll be launching next year, and we're currently at the moment in the design phase. So if you have specific features that you would like to see on that app, please do let us know. One of the things that we've been talking about is a feature to be able to do tap to pay. And so I know that was mentioned in one of the questions here. We're hoping to be able to have that. But again, we'll be investigating that as we develop the project plan for that mobile app. And then there were questions around specific stations. So I won't touch on all of them, but there was quite a few around the Torrance station and that particular area. And so the Torrance station is expected to come back online. We're expected to come back online. I believe it was Air Products mentioned it this week or possibly next week. But again, please do check the note here. I'll definitely reach out to Air Products to make sure that this gets updated. But again, in our last conversation, they mentioned that it could be potentially back online either this week or the next couple of weeks here. Just browse through. So Dave, there was a question around buses, and around the mobility strategy, and then also, when as we're considering trucks, what's the thoughts around buses? Can you touch on that topic?
Yeah, that's great. A really great question. Our friend and colleague Keith Malone, you may remember him from past webinars. One of his common phrases was, buses and the transit bus market are the canaries in the coal mine. They really are the indicators of where the future of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies lie. And what we indeed are seeing is a rapid increase in the adoption rate of fuel cell buses across transit agencies, not just in California, but across the United States and the world. And that is in part due to their experimentation with the different types of technologies and their mandates to get to zero emission vehicles, both from a air pollution, so ozone and diesel particulate matter perspective, and then also from a greenhouse gas perspective on their sustainability plans. What we're seeing is a rapid increase in demand of hydrogen within the transit market. In fact, what we're seeing is, in some cases, transit companies purchasing fuel cell electric buses before they have infrastructure in place, and then scrambling to get the hydrogen fueling infrastructure to support those vehicles when they're delivered. We see this as a major indicator because that, again, being the canary in the coal mine, indicates to us that the diesel truck market will follow that glide path. And yes, that does indeed get to our vision and strategy. Ben, I'm not sure if I answered that question completely, though.
No, I don't think you did. And if for those that asked the question, if we didn't address it, please do ask it again. There was a question also around port sites and how that plays into our vision and strategy and just mobility in general. Can you talk about ports?
Again, a really excellent question. We see the ports as really the core focus of the early market deployment for fuel cell electric trucks. There are several reasons why the ports are a really excellent core place, but obviously the first is the drayage market that moves goods into and out of the ports are more of that hub and spoke network, and that makes scaling infrastructure that much easier. If we have, for the example of Southern California, we have a port complex that is one of the largest in the world, the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach. Trucks move out of those ports through distinct corridors and into the inland empire, where the distribution networks move goods to parts outside of the region in the greater United States. But what's beautiful about the ports is if we can concentrate our fueling infrastructure in, for that example, in and around the Los Angeles market, that will benefit all the markets that we described, the automotive market, the truck market, and then what we have also is an emerging off-road sector. The off-road sector is a euphemism for construction equipment and port equipment, and those predominantly run on diesel fuel. So they are, again, obvious candidates for fuel cell electrification. We have several demonstration projects going on with cargo handling equipment at the ports of LA and Long Beach. And so again, having those that concentration of fuel offtake, hydrogen offtake in a set geography really helps the economics of the market overall.
Thanks, Dave. Next question is around selecting of hydrogen sites for stations. And I think this was specifically around light duty, but perhaps you could touch on it on both light duty and heavy duty. But the question is, how are sites chosen for or selected for infrastructure?
Again, a really excellent question. We have on our website the 2019 OEM priority locations. So if you go into the search function of the website, under resources, type in 2019 OEM priority. And what that will do is take you to a letter that our vehicle manufacturers, and this is all light duty market specific, our vehicle manufacturers identified the priority markets where they would like to see fuel cell or hydrogen dispensing development around California. And that is a process that the Fuel Cell Partnership has been running since the early market. 2019 was the last time that we ran this exercise, but we anonymously polled the vehicle manufacturers to identify where their preferred market locations are, and then we compiled those survey results, and that became that letter that you will find on our website. Again, that's specific to the light duty market. On the heavy duty market side, the way the market is rolling out is it's much more measured. And that is the difference between the commercial and the consumer market. On the commercial market, it's all about the bottom line. What is the cost of hydrogen that's delivered to my fleet? The way that we control cost in that scenario is we deliver the amount of hydrogen that the fleet needs in the time that the fleet needs it. So we take uncertainty out of the equation, and therefore the cost can be controlled in a much more nuanced way. In terms of identifying locations to develop stations to support those fleets, it's best to talk to the fleets and talk to the vehicle manufacturers to identify where the rollout of vehicles will happen. And then one point is that it is best to go to our map, and we will be expanding the fuel cell, or I'm sorry, the hydrogen fueling map for the heavy duty side. But if people have already identified geographies on which to build fueling stations, so they have site control and they have already in process the planning and permitting underway, those are probably not good geographies to locate another heavy duty fueling station, because then there will be a parasitic competition going on between the two sites. So again, on the commercial side, we really do encourage you to do your homework and due diligence.
Thanks, David. I think we have time for one more question. And so there's a question around the comparison of hydrogen or hydrogen fuel cell trucks in comparison to battery electric trucks, and where folks can find that information, and if it's available in this ebook that is being published.
We at the partnership are supportive of all technologies. We don't, obviously our mission is to encourage the development of the hydrogen marketplace so that we ensure the success of fuel cell electric vehicles. But our manufacturers manufacture all manner of vehicles. And so we try not to pit the two types of vehicles against each other so much as identify the synergies that occur between the two. And so where fuel cell electric vehicles really shine is in high load, high utilization scenarios. Let's talk about the best scenario. It would be a 3-shift scenario, a drayage operator hauling 85,000 pounds of cargo to and from a location within the port complex and the distribution network, warehouse network. These would be fast turnaround trips where the trucks are in constant utilization at heavy load. That is where fuel cells really do work optimally within the network, and you will get the most money out of that vehicle. In the battery electric side, if it's more of a stop and go operation where vehicles are required to make local deliveries and they don't cover a huge amount of range, they might carry a high load, but their range might be low. That's where the battery electric vehicle will outshine, because from a cost perspective, the cost to operate that vehicle will be lower than a fuel cell or even a diesel vehicle. So it's very much use case dependent.
Thanks, David. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer to close out. First, again, thank you to everyone who submitted questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of them, and there were some specific questions about specific stations. We will address those questions again in a blog, and we'll post that up and shoot an email to all of you where that information is located. And so with that, Jennifer.
Thank you again, Ben, and thank you, Dave, and thanks to everyone for all the great questions. I just want to say that I think it's been made evident today that our members really are the market makers, and so we welcome those stakeholders that want to join this conversation and join us in helping to accelerate our global effort in hydrogen mobility. And with that, I believe we're at time, so I will say thank you again very much and enjoy the rest of your day.